Hey, my name is Lisa Hemeon, and welcome to the Botwood Flying Boat Museum. Come on in. I'd love to show you a lot about our aviation history, and then we're going to go to another part of our heritage park, to our other museum, so you can see our local history, and we love seeing visitors come in. So this here museum was built in 2007. It is the Botwood Flying Boat Museum. We have an aviation history here that is unique and world-renowned. Let's go through our museum. So there was a time when the world kept their eyes on little Botwood, Newfoundland. We had the big, beautiful, luxurious flying boats of Pan American, British Overseas Aircraft, Imperial Airways, and also American Export Airlines. Our aviation actually started in 1920 when we had an Australian pilot come here who was hired by the Newfoundland government to come in and search for the seals, the packed ice. He was hired to deliver mail, deliver passengers, and spot fires. He was here for 3 years. He was a fiery Australian. Didn't take well to authority, but he left his mark here for sure and came up with a lot of inventions while he was here, one of them being skis on a plane. He had lots of crashes, but at the end of the day he left. And he left behind hangars. He went on in World War II then to be working with Ian Fleming, the author of James Bond, and ended up, they say that they based the character of James Bond on Sidney Cotton. 1933, Charles Lindbergh and his wife arrived here in their plane. They had been hired by Pan American Airlines to search for a last refueling spot for the big flying boats they planned on flying transatlantic. He chose Botwood for the very same reason we've always been chosen for any type of work. It's because of our beautiful harbor. It's big, it's large, it's deep. We are relatively fog-free and well protected here. We are located actually 35 miles off the coast, northeast coast, which means you literally are in the center of the island when you come here. That's very unique as our history. Then we had the big flying boats, those luxurious flying boats coming in here with test flights at the beginning. And then again, they started flying in on regular scheduled flights. They would fly from New York to Foynes, Ireland. Sometimes they would stop in Shediac, Montreal, to drop off passengers or pick them up. But they always had to stop in Botwood to get their last refueling before they left to go to Europe and when they came over from Europe. So therefore, we as a small little town of 1,000 people seen a lot of really rich, wealthy people that came through here and influenced us a lot. So as you can see, the lap of luxury when you flew in these flying boats, you had dining rooms, you had libraries, bars, game rooms, and sleeping berths. It was 5-star plus service. These flying boats could have easily flown well over 100 people in them. Usually it was about 40 people aboard these flying boats to make room for the luxury that these people wanted. The average, in today's world, the cost of a flight from New York to Foynes would be about $20,000. So, you know, it was good. And also the service you've seen on those flying boats are nothing like we're not getting that now. They also had bridal suites, honeymoon suite on the B314. Then in 1939, the war came to Botwood, and we got chosen as an RCAF reconnaissance base. So we had the PBYs coming in here. They would fly out to 35 miles out to the northeast, and they would escort the ships that were here in our harbor. They'd go in big lineups out as far as they could out to the northeast coast, looking for submarines, always checking for submarines. So you can imagine that a town with 1,000 people, and we had 10,000 troops come through here. So that was quite a shock to our system. They set us up in infrastructure that the rest of Newfoundland had never seen, so that was good. There were a lot of marriages. There were a lot of children. But again, they left their mark with us. And their presence here will never be forgotten, and you will see remnants of that later on in your tour. Of course, we had lots of passengers that came through. One local guy who had taken a flight from here to New York. He was a businessman, and we were lucky enough that he had saved everything, his ticket, everything. And his wife, who was irritated, said when he passed, she brought this down in a plastic bag saying, hey, like, I don't know why he told me, but just take it. I've been trying to get him to get rid of it. These things are now precious. That's an actual ticket from the flight he took. So our actual tickets for when you come into our museum, that's what they are. And here we have B-314, the Boeing B-314. And this plane was the biggest one that came to in this town. This is what you call it, granddaddy of luxury. This is the one that had the bridal suite. This is the one that the most famous people flew in on. And of course, when the war came, the war effort took over the planes. They took the colors off the planes, they dulled them, and then they retained the crew because the crew knew the route better than RCAF. So in those planes now during the war were only high-end military or people who were really needed for the war. So this is the ones that Roosevelt, Winston Churchill would have flown in on a different flight. You want me to turn that on? Winston Churchill flew in here. Bob Hope. So Bob Hope, anyone American flying in here would have flown in on this. This one was flown by Pan American Airlines, owned by Pan American. We had the world famous people coming through here. Winston Churchill, Bob Hope, Francis Langford. We had royalty, the Queen of Luxembourg, and many more people that we'll never know who flew in here because it was top secret. You could not go around town saying, guess who I met? We also were equipped with a village that was built by British Overseas Aircraft Corporation. It was located a little further from here, and when a person would come in on a flying boat, they'd walk up the pier, go over to the terminal, which is where our second museum is. That is the original terminal that was used during that time. And they would get off, go in one door, use the telephone if they had to, send a telegraph, send mail, then go out another door, get in a vehicle that would be provided, and go up further uptown to the VIP building, which is where your Winston Churchills and Roosevelts stayed. Or there was a village just below that that was built for them that had a restaurant and sleeping accommodations, a bar, the Caribou Club, and all that. So we were well equipped for whoever came in here. And we gave them 5-star themselves because they were coming off 5 stars. So that's it. Now, here we have something really special. This is a prop from the flying boat that was flown in here by American Export Airlines, the Excalibur, and it crashed in our harbor in 1942. The story actually is on the other museum. It's done in 3D. The story is quite amazing. But I'm going to quickly tell you the story. This plane crashed in 1942 trying to take off in our harbor. Aboard that plane that day was 36 people. 11 people died. And 26 people or 25 people would have been rescued. On that plane that day, and here's a list of who was on the plane, were only 2 women aboard. The rest were men. All of them, most of them, military related. There were some reporters there from Reader's Digest, things like that. And one of the women aboard that plane, her name was Adele Jenkins, and Adele was the chief air hostess. And her job was to make sure everybody was comfortable and look after the flight. She had quite a background herself. She had started flying as air hostess as the first graduating class of TWA, and so worked with Howard Hughes for 8 years, worked with various companies across the states, then finally took this job with American Export Airlines. So that day when that plane crashed in 1942, the story started coming out, which we only, when we started doing research on the passengers, we realized what a story we had here. So when the plane crashed, it cracked behind the wings on the bottom of the plane and began to slowly sink into the water. Adele Jenkins, who was only 5'2" and maybe 115 pounds, because you couldn't be big to be air hostess, immediately got up and instructed everybody on the plane, if you can move, I want you going out this way, you need to hold on to something. She made sure all the people who weren't hurt badly got out, got holding on to something before the rescue boats got there. And then she dove back into that plane 6 more times, and she saved 5 men. And the sixth time she went down to get her co-worker who was stuck in his seat, and she kept pulling on his hand, and then finally she felt life leave his body because he let go. And so she came up to get a breath of air to go back. She was determined to get him out, but she passed out. She then got pulled into a rescue boat by two gentlemen, or two of the officers here. One was Officer Cody Mann, okay, and the other guy was the Reverend, the chaplain for the base. They were the two that rescued her out of the water. Brought her in. She was only out for about 5 minutes. She spent the next 3 days here looking after the passengers who had survived, helping to identify and make arrangements for the bodies that had passed. And then 3 days later, she flew back to New York. Within 2 weeks, she's doing back to flying. A lot of nerve. She was a redhead too, so there's something about those redheads. They're pretty tough. I started digging, thinking, well, I wonder what happened to her after all that. And then I located an article about her 9 months later that she's announcing that she is retiring from aviation, which you had to. Back then, if you were a female and you were getting married or you got pregnant or engaged, you would have to leave your job. You had to be single to be an air hostess. She announced that she was leaving her job because she was getting married. And she was flying to Botwood to get married. And she was marrying Flight Officer Mann, who rescued her out of the water. And they were being married by the chaplain, who was the other guy who took her out of the water, which is absolutely like a blockbuster movie. She went on to have a very good life with him. He was a stockbroker from Wall Street. He had lots of money. Before she agreed to marry him, she made him promise that if we get married, I marry you, I want to be sure that when we retire, we're going to be retiring in warm waters. She said it took her years to get this coldness out of the water out of her bones. So they ended up retiring in Florida and had a wonderful life, lived a long life too. Had no children, but all that. But the one thing that really piqued my curiosity about her was, how does such a small woman, okay, be able to dive back into a plane that's sinking in really cold waters in October? How did she do that? Like, that almost seems impossible. And it was until I located an article about Adele, and when she was 14 years old, she swam the widest width of the Hudson River in record time. So she was a born swimmer. A lot we had to go through to get information. We managed to locate some of her personal scrapbook from a museum in New Jersey. But she was an amazing woman, and I hope someday I get the opportunity to write about her in a much bigger way, because there's a lot of stories. So, just to finish off this here, these are models of the types of planes that came in. Like I say, the war changed everything, the look of everything in our town, and of course the military presence. I also wanted to show right here, this is the accommodation. So I told you about the little village that was built. It's called Caledonia Camp, so this is a picture of it here. This is the VIP building, which your Winston Churchills would have come and stayed at. And this is the Transatlantic Inn, which was just located just across from where we're at now. It had 28 rooms in it. It really don't look like it. I've seen a aerial view of that building. It's a lot bigger than what it's showing in the camp. This lady here, Mrs. Cobbs, she accommodated anytime there was a plane crash, all the traffic and that, she was there for it. So, and here are some of the more famous people that came through here. And Bob Hope, he did a show for the troops here, as well as Edgar Bergden, Charlie McCarthy, and Francis Langford. Winston Churchill got stuck overnight, and I talked to the gentleman who had worked with him as a young boy when he arrived. And he said that he really blew our minds, because he said, when I went to him and asked him what he wanted for breakfast, lunch, and supper, it was lobster. And he said, we found that very funny, and because lobster back then was a poor man's meat, you know, and he said, but he loved lobster, and lobster is what he got. So, and he said he was a very down-to-earth guy. He was more interested in knowing about that young man's family and things like that, more than talking about himself. So that was a good thing. And this is a Canso, the PBY. This is what the RCAF brought through here. And these were sleek. They could run for 28 hours and fly a lot further than most of the planes looking for subs. And just one last thing is if you notice these things sitting on barrels, those are kerosene lanterns. So if a plane had to land at night, these were put on barrel floaters. They'd be lit with kerosene, and then they'd be chain linked together. And two different little boats would take out the string of lights out to the harbor and line them up like a runway so that the plane could see where it had to land. That's pretty neat, I think. And of course we have a flight simulator here, which unfortunately is not up and running right now. But this simulates what it would be like the inside of one of these generic plane. It's not any plane in particular, but that's, you know, and also the inside of the plane would have been a lot bigger than that because you usually needed a crew of 8 to 10 people to run that plane. And we have another one here that was donated by a ex-military. Again, it just sort of simulates the flight, the movement, and things like that. And we also have in here, I'll quickly just show you because we're a small town, but we've got an awful lot of volunteers and a lot of hard-working people. This is our theater, so if you were coming in here for a tour, you would start your tour off with a 20-minute film that's from Shell Canada from 1939, and it talks about Botwood and the flying boats and that. So that we're pretty proud of that. And in here we have our repository. Sort of a little out, but so the repository, we have rare books in here, rare clothing. This is where we keep all of our things that really are super special. And then of course we have in through here our archive office. And this is where all the work gets done.
This is where you work?
No, actually my office is located in our town hall, but I do work at this. I have about 3 offices that I work at during the year, so that's a good thing. And so this is the Flying Boat Museum, so now let's get over to the Botwood Heritage Center and see what's going on there. Okay, so our Heritage Center is located just across what would have been the former tarmac for the flying boats or seaplanes. And actually, if you look down here, we have a PBY, which was used during the war. It's in bad shape now, but it's actually being painted and repaired in 2 weeks' time, so we're very happy about that. So this was quite a place during the war. It was an exciting place, and it was also exciting because of the flying boats coming in. I can only imagine what it would have been like to hear them coming in. And then, of course, located out here is Killick Island, which you'll be going to see later on. And that was, before the war started, that was just a piece of rock in our harbor. And then we ended up, during the war, they came in, they built what they call a breakwater out to the island. Then they blew half that island off, built 4 ammunition bunkers, and then they turned around and covered them with vegetation. So it's a beautiful spot. It's a wonderful place to get a good view of the harbor. So you'll get to see that. This is the Botwood Heritage Center. This is the original building that was built in 1936 as a terminal. It was built by British Overseas Aircraft. So the flying boats would fly basically down around where you see our pier down there. They'd fly in, the passengers would get off, walk up here. There would be a door located on one end of the building. They'd come in, they'd walk in through the terminal, drop off their mail, whatever they needed to do, go out a different door, be taken in a vehicle up to the VIP buildings and Caledonia camp. So we, if you do notice well, attached to this building up here is a brown house. It's attached to our building. That house was donated to us. We've been very lucky. The one thing that's kept our heritage going here and our 2 centers is the overwhelming amount of donations we've received from local people. So we're a very giving bunch here for sure. So this is where we house our local history, and there's a lot. And our history, the one thing that makes us stand out, or maybe the reason why a lot of people don't know about us, is that our history is not icebergs and whales and your typical Newfoundland fishing village. This was never a fishing village. This was always an international logging and shipping port. So our history is unique. We have aviation, but no fishing and no whales, no icebergs. So sometimes it's hard to fit in. And welcome to Botwood here. Located behind those bars are from the original jailhouse here. That's where we would have our shop, our gift shop, but it's not, of course you're here a little earlier than what we expect, so we're not really ready. So this is our gallery. This was just unveiled 3 years ago. I do want to start by saying to you that we are standing on the land that was and is owned by the Beothuk and all 5 indigenous groups of Newfoundland. We recognize that, and we hope that we can help with the truth and reconciliation. So the Beothuk, these were our first people living here. The Beothuk used Botwood, the harbor. So Botwood is located at the end of the biggest river in Newfoundland, the Exploits River, and the river flows into our harbor. The Beothuk at one time were all across Newfoundland, and then because of the Spanish, the French, the English, whoever came here to fish, they ended up being basically drove out of where they normally would have fished or hunted to central Newfoundland. Right here is where they ended up. They were in competition, or shall we say the civilians were in competition with the Beothuk for the very few things the Beothuk wanted to be here for. Fur, fishing, eggs. It was a beautiful place. This was once their homeland. We destroyed it. And it started in the 1400s when they started taking them on ships over for slaves, and then we started giving them our white man disease. So we learned a lot from the Beothuk and the indigenous groups on this island. One of the things we did learn about was winter housing. So as with the indigenous, they would go inland in the winter and out to the shores in the summer. And the Beothuk used our harbor to come off the Exploits River. They would go through our harbor and down to 35 miles to the northeast coast. And there they would collect their bird eggs, maybe seals, fishing, whales, whatever it was. But they lived on the inland because we had drove them there. Botwood, that was the first part of Botwood's history. Not a very good part. It's a dark part of our history. But in the 1860s, we had a Reverend Botwood who came here, and he recognized that we had a lot of, when it came to trees and things like that. And he ended up buying up all the timber rights in around here. And at the end of the day, he ended up giving us the first part of our history, which lasted well over 100 years. We started off as logging, and then we had the sawmills coming in through. And then we became really big at sawmills and lumber. Then eventually by 1909, we were now a shipping port for international paper. The paper would be produced and made in Grand Falls, which is about 30 minutes away. And then we brought out here to Botwood by trains, and then would be put aboard international ships and taken wherever in the world it was being sold to. So for 100 years, the company, which started off A&D, Anglo Newfoundland Development Company, and changed names over the years, which ended up, the last time they were here was Abitibi Price. They shut their doors in 2009 after 100 years of being here. What was the thing that got them out of here? It was the use of electronics and that. We no longer needed trees for that, the papers, and so we lost out. Sometimes it makes you wonder if we shouldn't go back to the paper sometimes. We were also known for being a shipbuilding area. Some of the biggest ships that were built for the A&D company were built right in our very harbor, and we had a couple of prolific families here who were well-known and master shipbuilders. So, and we're going to see a little more about their work upstairs. And of course the Botwood Railway, we all love the Botwood Railway. It was an arm for us because nobody had a car really. There was no real roads built at that time. So people would take the train. Not only was it used just for the paper, but the company itself would allow a couple times a week for the mothers and wives to get on the train and go shopping in Grand Falls. So that was nice. They also allowed Sunday schools and that they would provide transportation free for the kids from schools or Sunday schools to go out for picnics along the way and things like that. As in this picture right here, you can see these are kids who are eagerly awaiting the arrival of that train on this Sunday so they can go out for the picnic. So that's pretty neat. And also during the war, It was used for the soldiers to take them back and forth. They were hosted a lot in Grand Falls and also out to Gander, because Gander was the second place where the soldiers would go and train. We also had many waterfront, not many, but we had a few waterfront fires, significant ones. But in 1961, it burnt down the entire waterfront. And the, shall we say, ironic or not so ironic part was, in 1961, we had just purchased our very first fire truck. It had never answered a call until that day. That was its first call. It was drove out to the wharf, and then the wharf collapsed, and we lost the fire truck. So it never even got to squirt some water out. And of course, the end of the era, the end of everything we knew here, was when the shipping stopped and ceased to exist, the company in our town. And it was pretty devastating, because you have to understand we had generations of people who worked for this company. So as a matter of fact, my own family, my great-great-grandfather, he worked with the company. His sons worked with the company. My father worked with the company, and my father was part of the last bunch that came out of that. Many times the company would say, "You got a son? We'd like to give him some work," right? Not many women work with the company. If you did, it was usually secretarial or preparing maybe sales or something like that. But other than that, the women had enough work at home with kids and everything else. So, and of course, World War I was devastating for every country, but especially for Newfoundland. We lost a lot of men in the Royal Regiment. Here in this town, we had a very special soldier. We had a lot of guys who lined up. Actually, Botwood had the highest per ratio sign up for World War I soldiers than anywhere else in Newfoundland. One soldier by the name of Arthur, and there was a book wrote about him. His name is Arthur Manuel. The book is called A Boy from Botwood, and it's really a good read. He went overseas, he served, he became a prisoner of war. And when he returned, he only stayed here come back home for a couple of weeks, and then he left and went to Ontario. He married, built and opened a hotel, worked the hotel, and retired, and refused to ever talk about when he was overseas, never got involved with the Legion. Nobody really figured there was, much to it for him. Until after he died. 25 years after he died, his grandson was in the garage looking through some old boxes and found a leather binder of his grandfather's memoirs of when he was a prisoner of war. So I guess after Arthur Manuel retired and sold his hotel, he then hired a secretary to come in, and she typed his memories of the war. And they were profound. You've now seen World War I through the eyes of a foot soldier, but a very intelligent man. And a man that, if in today's world, certainly would have been way up as a really highly educated man. The book, like I say, is worth a read. It can't help but pull on your heartstrings too. So, and of course, we already know about the aviation and all that. As I said, we've been extremely lucky here for people donating and all that. During World War II, we had a cottage hospital that was built here, a military hospital. When the war ended, it was sold to the Newfoundland government for $1. And then it was given to us, and we opened up the Botwood Cottage Hospital. And it ran till 1983, when it shut down because we had built a new place. Before they shut it down, they gave us whatever we wanted. So here you see a representation of what would have been used years ago at the hospital and things like that. Some of these tools, not like in today's world where you can call UPS and say, I need it tomorrow. Some of these things were tools that were originally meant for one thing, but had to be modified quickly to accommodate something here and now. We had fantastic doctors who came through here. We've been very blessed, but in particular, one doctor stood out to us. He was Dr. Toomey. And he came here, he had his family here, he raised his family here, and actually our new center that was opened when the old cottage hospital closed is called the Dr. U. Toomey Healthcare Center. It's named after him. He actually ended off his career as Minister of Health for Newfoundland. He was from Ireland, Cork, Ireland, and he was a character. He loved us. There wasn't everybody we meet, we all know that he was the first one to give us a good slap on the ass, because he birthed all of us. But he was involved with everything. He was a real community member, and we adored him and still do. And this is some of the things that were modified. So this is Dr. Toomey's. This is for making cast. And Dr. Toomey himself built this with help with one of his guys from the hospital. And actually even used his own shoes to help people to get their feet in there. So it's pretty neat. This is now the Tony Stuckless room. Another guy who donated everything in this room except for this canoe, which we'll talk about in a minute. We have an antique gun collection that is fantastic. So Tony had been a wholesale businessman, had traveled to Newfoundland all of his working life, and he was a wheeler and dealer, and he was an antique collector. Everything you see here, he gave us, especially these things, these little items you would have seen in a regular store. But I always look at this one here, it's Kellogg's asthma cigarettes, and I'm like, okay, that makes no sense, but okay, it did back then. The canoe I wanted to talk about really quickly. So this was built by Mr. Seward, and Mr. Seward was a World War II vet. He had been caught in the Japan, a prisoner of war out of Japan. He arrived here one day, and he was only, I think, 96 when he came. And behind him was this canoe, and he said, I built 3 of these canoes for Memorial University back in the 80s. He said one is located in Boyd's Cove, down at Boyd's Cove, Bealthic Interpretation Center. The other one, he said, was given to the rooms, but it got destroyed. And he said, and I've been around the island, I want this in your museum. So he built this. This is birch bark, and it's made with all of like bear fat and things like this, you know, this stuff to seal it. It is not a indigenous canoe. It is what the pioneering people would have used on the Exploits River. But again, we see the influence of the indigenous in this, because if you look, it's built with birch bark, which is what the indigenous would have built it with. It's done with certain roots, or you know. So again, the influence. This also did go into the river, the Exploits River. He said because before he gave it, he had to make sure it was waterproof and could float. So he was a beautiful man, Mr. Seward, and talked about when he was in World War II as a prisoner. That and we all know that Japan, it was a lot more extreme. He told me that one of the stories he told me that really stood out was how when they were in prison there, they had to shave their eyebrows. They could not have no hair on their body whatsoever. He said, and if you were found with a hair hanging out, they would take it out with tweezers and take part of your scalp. So he said, anytime there was just a shred of steel or anything, we gathered it. He said, so eventually I could make a razor of our own. And he said, and that razor saved many a man. So, and he said he was 145 pounds when he got caught prisoner of war. When he was released 3 years later, he was 65 pounds. But what an extraordinary man. And I think he lived to be close to 100 years old, if not indeed 100. It's a pleasure. This is when it's a pleasure to meet living history. So now we have another old level here to go. So we'll go upstairs to our next level. Again, you can see from our wall here how lucky we've been with donations. And I want to point out too that you're only seeing 10% of what we have in artifacts. 90% is in storage. So it's really nice to see.
Do you rotate them?
Yes, we try our best. Some of them are permanent exhibits, but we've been trying to keep, some kind of a change. In this room here, this will show you basically the last moments of the life of Botwood. She was a Bealthic woman who had been captured by locals, taken to St. John's, where we were hoping that she could become friends with us, learn English, go back to her people, and say, hey, they're good people, after we had done everything we could to kill them. She died in Botwood Harbour, 1820, at 2 p.m., January 8th. And that's where we're going to end up at the site. There's nothing you can say to make us feel better. dark part of our history. I cannot sugarcoat what happened to the Beothuk. We were cruel to them, doesn't matter why. And this woman was stolen from her people 9 months previous. Her newborn child died 3 days after she was stolen. Her husband and his brother were shot dead in front of her before they took her. Then she was taken to St. John's, shown to the public. We gave her gifts. She was very graceful during the entire time because all she wanted was to go home and see her baby. She wanted her baby. And she did everything she could to work with us just so she could see her baby. But she caught tuberculosis. So when she was sick and dying, we decided we're going to send her back to her people now. But she didn't make it. She died in our harbor. And eventually her body was taken back up to Beothuk Lake, where she had been taken, and placed in what looked like a burial hut of one that had her husband and child in. And if that's not bad enough what we did to her, 20 years later, a Scottish scientist come over, found that burial hut, and took the skulls of Botwood and her husband Newfoundland. So those skulls sat in Scotland in the archives for 200 years. And we just got them back. After many, many years of fighting to get back their skulls, they are now back in Newfoundland custody. We are now trying our best to honor these people. We know there is DNA, Beothuk DNA, out there amongst some people. So, although they're not as a race exterminated, we exterminated their culture. We know very little about the Beothuk culture, and that's on us. And it's unpleasant. Myself personally, I have no doubt that my ancestors were probably involved with part of what we read about and all that. So all we can do is just try our very best to move forward and try to make no more mistakes like that again. So this is actually the Beothuk room is the first one that was ever built into here. And this here. So into shipbuilding. We were very lucky again. We had a family, one of the prolific families that built ships in this harbor, were the Evans family. And they donated all of this shipbuilding tools, pictures and everything, and we're forever grateful. These guys built some of the biggest schooners ever coming out of the harbor, or in Newfoundland for that matter. This in particular is quite interesting. This was built by Henry Evans, who had been one of the master shipbuilders. And when he retired and could no longer do the big ships, he started building little scale models. And this was donated by his nephew. So if you zoom in, you will see a little pocket knife sitting right on the deck of this little boat. Now, I wanted to tell you that every part of this moves. You can open the door, you can move the sails, everything. Here's the amazing thing. Henry built this with that pocket knife. That's what he used to carve and everything. All kinds of patience. So we're forever grateful for that, because that is a beautiful scale model of one of the more popular ships that he had built. And sometimes we have history that is lost and found. And this is the Falkenberg room, and this is the lost and found history. The Falkenbergs descend from Swedish nobility, arrived here in 1842. And that was the first generation. The second generation, they ended up in Quebec. The second generation ended up here in Botwood. They came here because they were running one of the big lumber companies. They ended up having 6 children here, all baron and baronesses. Then left, they were here about 15 years, and then left to go to Quebec because the father had died. Then they got lost in history because they had no family here. Nobody was talking about, so-and-so. What happened was, about 10 years ago, I get a call from a company in Ontario who were doing a story about a Captain Falkenberg, a flying ace. And they said he was born in Botwood, and I said, never heard of that. So we start researching, we found out, my God, yes, these guys were here and they had a big presence here, and they were quite a very well-known family across the world, and they had rubbed elbows with the most famous people in the world. So then I reached out trying to figure out where is that family now, and after digging and digging and digging, We did locate the grandchildren of the one that had lived here in Botwood. So Friedrich Andreas Baron, see? Baron Friedrich Andreas. So if you want to see who he was, he is the first guy on your left, the big mustache. This is a wedding that happened here in Botwood in 1899, and actually in the front are some of the children of that family. So he had been here, his son, and actually after I finally located the family, I said, do you have any pictures or anything? I'd like to do a little, exhibit on you guys. It's amazing, your family history. Oh, he said, do we ever? So what they did was first he sent the uniform that would have been worn by the grandfather and great-grandfather, because they were actually the consuls for British North America for the Sweden and Norwegian government. Quite a title. So this is the uniform that he would have worn. This is a 160-year-old uniform, 160 years plus. And these are the medals that would have been given by the governments of Sweden and Norway. And the hat box, and the sword. And I couldn't believe it. I was just, what? Then we got into this more. Again, I apologize. The wall seems to be out, but it's only because we're not officially open yet. So this is where the television company was coming. It was all about Baron Karl Falkenberg. So he was born here in Botwood, and then in World War I, went over, him and his brother Gerard went over and fought. Gerard as a pilot, and Karl Falkenberg was a foot soldier. But he got caught in mustard gas in one of the battles, ended up spending 6 months in an English hospital, and decided he wanted to fly. He didn't want to go back into the trenches. While he was in the hospital, his brother Gerard got caught. His plane crashed, he got caught, he became a prisoner of war. So Karl Falkenberg then became a pilot. And he was a pilot for the last 2 years of World War I, and he became a flying ace. And a very well-known flying ace. And not only so, he received the Distinguished Flying Cross, but he also received the bar. And the bar is just above it. And the bar was only given to 9 Canadian pilots in World War I. So this is a guy from Botwood. He was friends with, Bishop, all these famous world flying aces, and kept in contact throughout the rest of his life. He also witnessed the autopsy of the Red Baron, and he wrote about it. So here we have the flight logs from World War I, from when he was in World War I. He kept them, his awards, and this is the amazing part. This family was so giving. Here is some of the awards, but these are his medals. And they're precious. I've seen guys come in here from the military and literally get weak in the knees when they see these medals. So Falkenberg was and then he ended up serving in World War II. And he served on Canadian soil, became a wing commander, overseeing a lot of military bases and that. His story is, wow, the whole family story is just, it's mind-blowing. They've married into stories that he wrote, because when they sent me all these things, I located his diary. They didn't know the diary was there, so I took the diary, I typed it up. And in his diary he talks about how much he loves his wife, how much he loves his kids, talks a little bit about, the wars and things like that. But what I did see was how these guys were treated after the war ended. It was sort of like the government just, go away now. And some of them, like in the case of Karl, he had a plane crash where he had almost lost half of his nose in World War I. And when he applied for some assistance because he had problems with breathing and that, they weren't convinced it was from the war. So, and then they said, well, we can't help you when he wanted to get his veterans allowance, because they said, we don't have your birth certificate. Well, his birth certificate was from here in Newfoundland, which was an English colony at the time, but the church had burnt down, so there was no record. But his question, and I've read the letters, he was great at writing, is you didn't need my birth certificate for me to sign up for World War I or World War II, but you need it now for me to get my veterans allowance. So I think that he did a few changing and things like that. He lived to be 86 years old. He never forgot where he had been born. He had only been 9 years old when they left here. But I do know now that when he left here at 9, that's when his childhood stopped, because his dad had died. So, you know, his dad made his childhood good, and his mother was great too. But when they left here, he and his brother were sent to a private military college by by the company that ran the paper company. They were good friends with the paper company owners, and that's who paid for the military college.
Lisa, you've done a lot of research. How long have you been here?
I've been a member of the Heritage Society since 2010. I've been in my position since 2000, so 7 years now. I've been with the town working in this. I just love history. This is not even what I did for a living. I was a human services worker and a paralegal for most of my career. And when I came back here with my daughter back home, right? Because there's one thing they say about Newfoundlanders. I was living in Prince Edward Island, and beautiful Prince Edward Island. But they always say it's just like we always want to go home. And the saying is, you always know who the Newfoundlander is in Newfoundland, in heaven, because he's the only one who's crying to go home. So we all leave and go away, but we all want to come back. When I came back here, I realized that I had to do, I had my daughter, I had my mom, I had my dad, but I needed something for me. And either that was going to be bingo, which I'm not a bingo girl, drinking, which I don't mind to drink every now and then, but not all the time. Then I thought, well, let me bite into history. So the Heritage Society allowed me to become a member, and it's just, basically these things were just falling into my lap. So it's not like I went looking for it so much as they called and said, the Falkenberg family. It's like, now I can find out everything I can about it. And I don't have much of a social life, so as a result, the research gets done. Being a paralegal did teach me give me some really refined research skills. So and of course it's a mystery. It's like opening that box, and then there's another box inside, and it gets exciting. It builds and builds and builds, and then finally we opened this room, and Carl Falkenberg's children showed up for the opening, made significant donations to our museum. But out of everything they gave us, the one thing that thrilled me the most was 10 short stories that he had wrote about growing up here in Botwood. And now you could see the world of Botwood during the turn of the century through the eyes of a child. And it was amazing. The stories were just amazing. And every story I could literally back up with historic events during the time and pictures. So that was a gem for me for sure. And we are forever grateful for the Falkenberg family, because they are such great supporters of our museum. And now we're into our military room. This is our next big exhibit that is going to change around a little bit eventually. Of course, military presence was huge here during World War II. World War I, it was huge for Newfoundland. We lost a few men. We had a lot join. In particular, this here is a Queen's Own rifle, the display that was donated by one family. It's outstanding what they've put in it. They came in. This family in particular, Thomas family, we have a room that's theirs here too. And they showed up when I was, and like I say, things falling in my lap. These two people who I'd never met come in and said, you know, we got a couple of items we'd like to donate to your museum. And they showed up with a couple of items, and it was great, because this is great practice for me archiving. And they said just a few items, about 10. When we were finished, there were over 350 items they had donated. This is only part of it. The uniforms, everything. They've been outstanding, again, members and people. And of course we have all of these uniforms and things like that. Once again, mannequins are are quite precious for us, but we are in the middle of getting this all redone. So now I'm going to slip you through here, and we're going to go to another part. And this is the Thomas collection. So these are the guys who donated that Queen's Own rifle. This is what I call my eclectic bag of tricks. This room, everybody can relate to something in this room. Whether it be an old toy, or the marbles, or the Queen, or I remember Mom had a bottle like that, but everybody, and this is the room, I call this is where you can stand and have great conversations. Like for instance over here in this display case, I look at the gloves and the pearls, and that reminds me of my grandmother. always had them on for church or special occasions and things like that. I'm sure that everybody at some point had this in their house, because I remember almost every one of my relatives did. And God bless us, Queen Elizabeth had a strong presence to us here, so I'm not surprised to see that. And this is the wonderful couple here who donated it. They're sweethearts, and they keep coming with more stuff. So what I do is, you do what you want to do to your room. It's yours, you can display it as you want. So come on, let's go into what we call the antelouse. So the antelouse was donated to us by a couple. It was located 4 houses up from where we're at. And this couple decided they didn't want the house anymore. They wanted to build a new house on this land. And they donated this to us. So we picked it up and moved it down and attached it to our museum. This is a timepiece, basically. So it just really you can look around and see. You got a spinning wheel. Even we're set and ready for our milk lunches or our crackers and that, which are all Newfoundland. So this couch was actually in the VIP building that we talked about over in the other museum. And this is the one they say Winston Churchill sat on. And I chuckled to myself, but I'm going to tell you, you have no idea how many people want to come sit on the same couch that Winston Churchill sat on. So I think that's amazing, right? And this is a wedding dress that was donated by a woman who was married to a soldier on this base and wore it on this very base when she got married. So, like you say, people just step out there and they really want to give you what they can. Like everybody, it's just overwhelming how much. We won't go up to the next level because it's just all storage, or it's part of one of our storage places. But there's another story up here for sure. And of course, that was a time when furs were okay. And this is, like I say, we've just sort of got a few things in here. We've got an old wooden washer that's 150 years old. An old wringer washer, which I remember that as a child. This is something that stands out. This was used during the 40s. Hairdressers used this to put curls in your hair, because back then didn't have curling irons and that. They would put some kind of a, I guess, liquid in your hair. They tap this on, make your hair curly and make you sit there. The problem with it, sometimes it burnt your hair off, whatever, but it's a scary looking machine, but I guess it was quite popular. And that's it for this part. And now I guess we'll head out and we'll head up to the Beata site. Welcome to our newest site. It's called Beata, which is the Beothic word for going home. This is in commemoration of Demesduit and all Beothic people and indigenous groups of Newfoundland. And we are now standing next to larger-than-life statues, bronze statues, created by local artists in St. John's. This is Nanusubut, who would be the husband of Demesduit, and this is Demesduit and their newborn child. 3-day-old child. So this is what we call the moment they actually got back together, is when she died. That's when the spirits returned. We want to look at this as a joyful thing, that she finally got back with her family. We also have a healing garden. So we're only in phase 1 of the healing garden right now. It's a multi-year thing. The healing garden is meant to be a place of reflection for people to come and celebrate life, celebrate the lives of Indigenous, and help with the Truth and Reconciliation piece. This was built with some significant funding from Heritage Canada, the Newfoundland government, some local partners, and with the help of the Indigenous groups of Newfoundland, their support. We would not have done it without them. So each year we build on this, and what we want in the end is no cement. We want this to be as natural a site as we can, with only native plants to Newfoundland. And every year we build it up and build it up and build it up. It was built here because if you take a look out that way, we have a beautiful view of the whole bay, Botwood Bay. You can also, if you go out around, you can actually see where you're heading out towards the northeast coast. This would have been the highway for the Beothic Indian during when they were living on the Exploits River. And actually we believe that they lived in around here as well. they would have used this as their highway to get out for seasonal hunting and fishing. Really, it was just being used by locals to come up and sit. We had a gazebo here, and we felt that this was the most appropriate place, because actually where that pier is sitting in the harbor would have been where the ship would have been anchored off, the one that Botwood died on. So it was very fitting to have it here. And we have washrooms that are being built. Like I say, we're in phases here, but we intend of build till this is like almost a healing forest of sorts, and beautiful place for just people to come see, sit, visit, reflect, and enjoy the beautiful waters and the beautiful view. And it's been a lot of work. It took us 6 years to get to this, but we're not going to give up on it. And hopefully, you know, the world will end up knowing about all of this as well, right? Because this is a beautiful spot.
Who's the artist?
The artist was McDonald, Morgan McDonald. He owns the Newfoundland Foundry in St. John's, Newfoundland. He is amazing. He has his works all across Newfoundland and in North America. But we were so proud that we got him, because he is a guy that works with you, and like you say, he has talent like you wouldn't believe. So we were very grateful that he did sign up for it, for sure. Beautiful stuff. Beautiful. This is actually my stomping grounds. I grew up here. This is where my family grew up. Like the next 2 blocks were all my family, and I grew up picking blueberries here, which is a Newfoundland tradition. We would have to do that. That was part of family duty. You got to go pick those blueberries because we need those for the winter. And partridge berries and whatever else could be picked, we picked it. So had a lot of time up here growing up, and a lot of fun, a lot of great memories. And I'm glad that this is going to now be used as something that's significant to our history. So as you can see, we already have blueberries popping up. We have partridge berries growing in here, and then we're about to get more work done with more plants being installed and things like that. So come back in a couple of years and you'll see it built up a little bit more and things like that. But as you can tell, Botwood is not just a little town. There's a lot. I call us the hidden gem, and that's exactly what we are. Because our history isn't icebergs and whales, they don't know really where to fit us. So we fit ourselves now, and we want you to say, come on in, come see what we got here, because it's going to blow your mind. People walk away going, I never knew that all this was here, and it's all here, and it's waiting for everyone to come see. So, and it doesn't matter what time of year it is, I'll take you on a tour. But if it's in the winter, I want a coffee bot from you afterwards. So it's a good thing.
Hello, my name is Matthew. We're at where the weather station would be for the Botwood, well, the weather station on the Killick Island of Botwood. So there was 2 weather stations here, and we have a shack built on one of the foundations where you're supposed to be able to look over through the orange window. You can see where one of the planes would be landing down the harbor that way, northern arm. So that body of water going down there is northern arm, and that's where one of the runways for the planes would land. And out that way, we have the Killick Island. So there's 4 bunkers on the right side of it, which were used to store ammunition during the war times, and that's about all.